My name is Katie Hearn, and I'm a freshman at CSUMB. This documentary is about the AIDS epidemic and the lack of education over it before entering college. One of the most shocking topics I learned about in this class was HIV/AIDS. After watching We Were Here, The AIDS Years in San Francisco by David Wiseman, I was in complete shock. Not only was I shocked, but I was disappointed that I could go 18 years in the public school system without any knowledge or any talk of the AIDS epidemic in America. I was very upset watching that movie and seeing that a whole community was torn apart because of this disease and no political figure made a real impact or change in this epidemic. This issue was merely put aside or swept under the rug by society after the worst of it happened. I wondered if there was any high school curriculum over this topic that wasn't just about the prevention of HIV/AIDS. I also wanted to get to the bottom of why this wasn't being brought up in the U.S. history class. I thought it was necessary to find out the answers to some questions and let everyone in class see what I found. Firstly, I talked to Principal Carlos Moran of Seaside High School. I asked if there was any curriculum over the AIDS epidemic. He said the only curriculum they have about AIDS is about AIDS prevention, which would probably be in health class. Next, I talked to Principal Kim Brentz of Lake Travis High School. I asked her the same thing that I asked Principal Moran. She said that schools in Texas do not require health anymore, but her as a principal thinks that it is necessary. She said that AIDS is only brought up when it comes to AIDS prevention. I mean, I figured that AIDS would be included in most health classes, but I learned that they only talk about AIDS when it comes to health and prevention, not in a sense of history or the effects that AIDS has had on America. And that brought me back to my initial question. Why isn't AIDS a part of U.S. history curriculum? Why aren't we learning about the effects that it's had on a generation? Why has it been ignored? I decided to ask a few questions to some people and just test their knowledge about AIDS and see what they know.
Okay, well, when I first think of HIV or AIDS, I think the first thing that comes to mind is gay men, even though nowadays it's not a disease of just gay men, but a very broad population, including a lot of young people.
I primarily think of the gay community.
So the first thing I think of whenever I hear HIV or AIDS is probably the celebrities that have it. I probably think of Magic Johnson and then just recently Charlie Sheen. It's one of those things, kind of like cancer. You just feel bad for the people that have it and for their families that have to go through that. So it's kind of a sour feeling in my stomach whenever people bring up AIDS and HIV. So.
So HIV it stands for human immunodeficiency virus, and it's basically a disease of your immune system. It's a breakdown of your immune cells in basic terms. And then AIDS is actually defined by certain illnesses, certain types of diseases that normal healthy people will normally be immune to, but people with HIV are much more susceptible to, and those types of diseases can be very, very threatening to you as a healthy person.
I'm not really sure.
So my general understanding of the difference between HIV and AIDS is that you contract HIV first, and that later develops into AIDS. That's what I would think. That's my general understanding.
Well, initially, HIV and AIDS tended to be a disease that was more common in men who had sex with men. However, we now know that the highest rate of new acquisition of the disease is actually in heterosexual people, and specifically young women is one of the highest rates of.
So I know that a lot of it is in Africa and has gone through different areas in Africa. However, I also know that it's in the United States and primarily in the gay community. But it has gone to other areas, like in other people besides that side of, or the gay community.
And whenever I think of the people that have AIDS, I know it's probably a stereotype, but I've heard that typically African American gay men, they started with it. And I know that's probably not the statistic anymore, but I know that's kind of how it started, and that's what people think, at least.
So actually, when talking about pregnant women or women who have HIV and whether or not they can A, get pregnant, and B, if they can deliver a baby without risk of what we call vertical transmission of the disease, it's actually a lot more feasible than most people might think. If you are a person with HIV, a young woman with HIV, and it's well managed and a woman is taking good control of it and taking all of her medications, it actually, if your viral load is below a certain level, then you can have a normal delivery, not necessarily even by a C-section. You can have a normal delivery, and it's a little bit more high risk, but done under the right circumstances, it is possible, and women can still have healthy, happy babies, which is what we want.
After interviewing them, I learned that all their knowledge about the disease came from classes in college or learning about it from their parents. In honor of all the people in America who have died from AIDS, can we make a change from the little education of HIV/AIDS?